Hello, and thank you for joining CBTS Tech Talk. I'm the producer, Lance Hart. And today on Inside the CISO's Office, we have a special guest with us. We have John Bruggeman, as always, our consulting CISO, and we have Pete Nicoletti. He is the field CISO of the Americas for Check Point. Guys, welcome. John, let's jump right in.
Thank you, Lance. Appreciate it. Pete, thank you for joining me here on Inside the CISO's Office.
Very excited to be here.
You and I were talking beforehand, and you have a great number of stories, and you've been in the business, we can both say, a long time, because you've got me by a couple years. What were some of the things you did before you joined Check Point?
Sure. So 32 year in IT, about 19 at the CISO level. So started very early, with PDP-11s and Novell, and I actually started an ISSP or an ISP, and it was one of the world's first wireless ISPs. But when I was hacked, I turned it into an MSSP, and actually that was one of my 4 MSSPs that I started and sold off. But for the last 18 or 19 years, I've been hardcore in security because my father-in-law's company was hacked.
Oh, that'll get your attention.
And the Chinese stole his recipe and put him out of business.
No way.
And I'll never forget that. And then I was hacked back in 92. And they said, you need this thing that's new. It's called a Check Point firewall. So I was introduced to Check Point very early on. And, like everything I do, I overcompensate. So I learned and studied and self-taught myself to be a security person. And
then you started to sell it because
I started to sell it and sold it to hundreds of companies and really did well with that as an MSSP. But then I got pulled up from the AAA ball league to Terramark. So I worked for a pretty large 1 million square foot facility down in Miami. And so for about 9 years, we had teams. We had 4 or 5 different teams that were either doing penetration tests, both physical and network, as well as incident response. So my team and I, we did hundreds of incidents, and we did hundreds and hundreds of pen tests. And it was even before Verizon bought us, but a lot of our reports and studies got included in that Verizon breach report. So very familiar with tracking on all the shenanigans that the hackers are up to. And
lots of hands-on experience.
A lot of hands-on experience. A lot of breaking into banks and...
See, now that would get people's attention if you said that you got to break into banks. And it's, people sometimes don't think about the need to test the controls that we put in place. And one of the things that I like to encourage people to do is to test the controls. So you can buy a great firewall from your favorite vendor, be it Check Point or some other vendor, but you want to make sure it's doing its job. So how would you do a test? How did you do tests when you're running either incident response or penetration test? And pick something that, can be generally.
So, sure, that's exactly right. When, for example, that bank that I briefly mentioned, they had a physical breach. They had,
somebody broke into the safe.
Somebody came in selling photos, pictures, and they broke through security, and it was a smiley, happy gal, and she actually got into the facility, and she had placed listening devices.
Yes.
So the bank overcompensated, and of course, after a breach like that occurs, they put in all new cameras, all new security protocols, and then that's when I got the call. Now, the cool thing about breaking into a bank is you get the get-out-of-jail card free.
Yes.
And it was especially important because the bank was next to a police station. So for a month, and they paid us quite a bit of money. It was a big 6-figure thing because we usually did, if we did it without physical evidence. So
that is different.
Breaking in
That's
with no
different.
evidence, because anybody can smash a window and break in.
Right.
So we had to lockpick. We had to wait until it was thundering and lightnings, and we were zapping the cameras so they couldn't see us. It looked like lightning strikes.
Okay.
And we came through a suspended ceiling. We had vacuum cleaners with 10-foot hoses to pick up vacuums. And we ended up breaking into every single office.
Did you plant a little card to say?
Yes, we planted cards.
Okay.
We were there.
Yes, we were there.
And of course, we penetrated the network as well and took all the customer data as well. So
And then after that kind of a penetration test, one of the things that we do as well is we do the write-up. I mean, you have to write up the report to let the people know how to improve their security. So did you always give them ways to defeat the methods that you had used to break in?
Absolutely. Okay. In detail.
In detail.
And we did this dozens of times. I had 6 different teams. So we were doing this constantly, and we had a really mature way of writing this up. And the same thing goes with, we were doing incident response. So we would do the same thing with incident response. What did we learn here? How are we going to deal with preventing the next incident? So, and the bottom line is that if you have enough time and money, anybody can be broken into, because we were never thwarted at all.
You were always successful
every single time.
It's good for people to understand. The way I used to describe it in, getting a program to work was, you got time, you have cost, and you have quality. You get 2 and I get the other 1.
Right.
So definitely it would be the same way with penetration tests, that with enough time, and unfortunately the hacking community, or the criminal, I really call them the criminal underground community, has almost an infinite supply of time if you're an attractive enough target.
If you're targeted, it's not a good thing to be.
Yeah.
Because
if you're interesting enough, you really have to have your defenses in place.
We would break into the executives' homes first.
Ooh.
We would go hit their wireless. And this was back when, it was real easy to break into wireless. Okay. And nobody changed their default passwords, of course. And now I'd show up with a black van and be sitting out in your front yard. But these were the days that nobody thought anything was funny.
Yeah. It's gotten harder.
It's gotten harder.
And that's one of the things that I like to encourage folks to do, is to put in controls to help your environment be less attractive to that criminal activity, and to make yourself a less easy target to hit.
It's like the old story. When you're running away from the lion, you just have to be faster than the last guy.
Yes. They call it the hunter's dilemma.
Yes.
You don't have to be faster than the bear or the lion, just faster than the partner you're with. And thinking about controls, when we think about the buzzwords that appear in the media, particularly in the security space, zero trust is one of those buzzwords that I've been talking about for the last 12 months. And as you and I both know, it's not a SKU or a product, but what would you say is your strategy for zero trust?
It absolutely is a journey. There's not one thing you're going to buy and all of a sudden you're zero trust compliant. So it is a strategy that you need to look at. And the first off is, I like to make the strategy, a little bit nicer. So I call it appropriate trust. It might be zero trust for hackers, but it's really appropriate trust. So you're matching up your employees and your partners and whoever needs access to your resources, and you're making sure that they get what they need to do to get their job done, but nothing more.
Right.
And that's why I call it appropriate trust, and it's a little bit of a kinder, gentler way of
talking about it. And that's a good point, because I have found over the last 12 to 18 months that initially people didn't blink an eye about zero trust, but now the employees, or your partners are starting to say, wait a minute, you don't trust me anymore. And to some degree, the truth of the matter is, you only want to give them the access that they need. And so using the term appropriate trust, I think, makes sense. Have you been involved in an appropriate trust network access journey for one of your customers?
Absolutely. Almost all of our customers are undergoing it, and there is stages of it. And one of the things that we've done very, very successfully is leverage the guidance that's coming out of the Zero Trust Working Group of the Cloud Security Alliance.
Yes.
So if you really want some great ideas and great steps, because as a security professional, you're having to sell this to the other executives. The executives are not coming to you and saying, hey, we want zero trust. That's not the way it works. The security guys are saying, and gals are saying, look, we need to appropriately manage who gets access to what applications.
Or data.
And data. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the guidance that's coming out of CSA on zero trust is fantastic. So I'm a member of the working group, and a couple of our architects are, and we've come up with a whole lot of really interesting generic, not checkpoint branded guidance on how to take those steps and how to sell it within your company. It's that 80-slide deck I think I sent you in preparation for this. So it really covers a lot of zero trust, and also covers a lot of cloud maturity, which is another very similar discussion on how you're leveraging and where you're putting your assets and which clouds you're using and how you're managing security between clouds. It's a very commingled topic because a lot of what you're doing with zero trust is you're matching up where is that resource. It might be in the cloud. So how is that access getting there when people are working from home and they're working from all over the place, and for partners as well. So being able to craft that and understand what the challenge is, and understand that you're not going to get all the way to the end day one.
Right.
It's going to take months, maybe years on a zero trust strategy.
Yeah, I gave a talk on zero trust last month at a conference in Dayton, Ohio, and in a room of 42 people, only 2 had started their zero trust journey. And
identity.
Yeah, and that's what I said. And one of the people said, "What do you start with?" And I said, "I'd always start with identity."
There you go.
Because if you don't know who is trying to access the resources, how do you know that you're provisioning the appropriate level of access? So, yeah.
What we're seeing is once customers are midway through, they start to see the real benefits of it, because HR says, okay, I've got a new employee that they're in this group, and within minutes they're giving
the access is created,
provisioned, everybody, they're able to work quickly rather than, oh, I need to open a ticket, I need access to SAP, oh, I need an access, I need to get to this, I need to get to
Salesforce.
That. Exactly, all those different types of tools. But if you're in the group and you're part of, you've got your zero trust strategy further along, everything becomes, and the same thing goes when you're deprovisioning.
Yeah, when there's a separation for whatever reason, I like to say when somebody wins the lottery and they say, "Thank you for I was so glad to work here, but now I've won the lottery. I'm going to go retire to Florida or whatever." So yeah, it's interesting as well, because I've seen a number of organizations that have a good provisioning. The deprovisioning is not quite as smooth.
If you look at how many incidents have occurred because they haven't done fully deprovisioned and they still have access to certain things. That's not something that you want to be able to have to write up in
as an incident response.
Yeah,
here's our after action report. You forgot to deprovision these 2 system administrators that had full access to all of your resources.
It's not a good story. Your insurance provider probably will be
unhappy
and not paying. Well, they'll be happy because they won't be paying.
As we think about other emerging potential threats, ChatGPT is an amazing technology that's been, some might argue, released to the world with very few guardrails. What is your take on the types of security risks or threats that a ChatGPT type tool has now provided either the threat actors or the criminal groups in terms of security?
Yeah, ever since November, we've been tracking on this, and Checkpoint Research just released some really interesting analysis of what some of these risks are going to be. What it's done, there's a couple things that are happening, of course. ChatGPT is the fastest growing technology that's ever been released, with the number of users since
like
November.
100 million in the first month.
It's crazy. So, but what it's doing on the hacking side of things, now on the defense side of things, we've always had artificial intelligence
or machine learning or whatever.
Both. At Checkpoint, we have 70 different engines. 40 of them are artificial intelligence, machine learning based.
Okay.
But what's happening on the other side of the coin is that it's lowering the bar for hackers, and in a couple different ways. If you look at it from the ability to write Python code quickly, you don't have to be a Python coder to be able to say, hey, I need you to write a Python script to do this, 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 and be able to combine that with another Python script and if you combine those, then it's actually a hacking tool.
Okay.
Now, the guardrails, as you mentioned, if you said, I want a hacking tool to give me remote access.
Write me a hacking tool to compromise this particular hardware.
Those semi-soft guardrails are going to prevent that. But if you say, I want to do this particular function, and it says, okay, here it is, and the code's there. So once again, it's lowering the bar for that type of a hacker. The other thing that is especially concerning, from my opinion, its ability to combine data sources and create super highly targeted phishing emails. Now, we're all dealing with, hey, your bank owes you some money, click here.
Yeah.
Or you've got a package that
Yeah.
you didn't order.
Your Amazon package has been delivered, but we need you to confirm the delivery address. Please click here and sign into Amazon for me.
Right.
Yeah.
And that fools a lot of people.
Unfortunately.
Right?
Yes.
But what this hyper-targeted ability of ChatGPT to combine previously hacked information, which there's hundreds and thousands of
lots of data breaches,
of data breaches, and then add health information from these hospitals are being breached on a daily basis. Then add social media information,
which doesn't even have to be hacked.
It doesn't have to be hacked, just assessed. So, we have people that talk about their cats. They talk about the trip that they're about to be on. When you start combining highly targeted bits of information with all that previous historical hack data, now you're able to create phishing emails that are like extremely plausible.
Right.
Your spider senses are typically pretty good. And hopefully you're going through training and all that good stuff to spot these things. But when you get something that talks about your cat and it's from your mom and it's from,
it looks like it's about your cat, or worse, your daughter or son or a grandson or granddaughter, and it looks like it comes from them because the name on the account looks really close to what they sent you a message from the last time. This does become a much more likely successful phishing email.
That's where it's going to be battle of the AI tools. So it's going to be companies like Checkpoint looking at those IPs that are being used, other characteristics to be able to stop that, potential email or that hack from causing havoc. So
you would see
battle of the AI is coming.
So do you see we'll have multiple lines of defense that have layers of either machine learning or artificial intelligence to defend specific types of attacks? So for the phishing emails, it would be a email security gateway that would look for typical signs of either artificially generated email.
Yep.
And then you might have other kinds of, like Python code, I guess it would be like a SQL injection against a web application. So like a web application firewall would have some kind of artificial intelligence built in for
absolutely
detecting and mitigating.
Absolutely. And these days, it's not good enough to just have detection.
Mm-hmm.
Checkpoint's been a leader in moving that thought process into a prevention mindset, because prevention saves you all the time and hassle of having to deal with, wait, I think I see something. I need to research that. And you're dealing with false positives. You're dealing with a lot of detection noise. But if you prevent the whole thing from happening, that's really the best thing.
So how would you want to make sure that people know that prevention is happening? Would you typically put that, like what I've found is you put in some good controls and suddenly you're mitigating 90% of the attacks. So it kind of looks like you're not being attacked unless you have a report that says, oh, by the way, we've mitigated 27,000 credential stuffing attacks in the last 7 days. These accounts could be compromised because they're stuffing credentials against them.
Well, you're bringing up a very funny challenge because, and I fought this when I was the CISO of Hertz, a Fortune 100 company. And the initial reports, the previous security people were always talking about how many attacks that we had against our firewalls. That's boring.
Yeah,
that's not helpful.
Well, and you kind of expect the firewall to prevent those.
Exactly. So now looking at what to report, what are the
metrics?
What's the metrics that you're trying to prove that your strategy and your entire portfolio is working good? So that's a big challenging area. So what you really have to look at is how fresh those attacks are. From 0 day, 0 day plus 1, 0 day. So we're actually tracking that, and we provide those statistics to our customers that show, all right, so this is a 0 day. Back December 9th, just a year ago, with Log4j.
Log4j. The gift that keeps on giving.
And it still is.
There's
still companies that are vulnerable to it.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But Log4j is a perfect example of, in the case of Checkpoint, preemptively blocking it. So no signature, no update, no previous awareness. It just looked like a weird sequence. And Checkpoint's the only vendor, preemptively blocked that attack.
So in December.
And on top of it, which is the other terrible, hidden nastiness, is were we vulnerable to Log4j ourselves? So our SBOM, we distributed our SBOM to our customers and everyone else within an hour, saying, hey, we know, because we're extremely mature in the way we develop our code and what libraries we use. Within an hour, we were talking to our customers saying, we're not vulnerable to it, and guess what? We've blocked it at the 0-day
edge,
0-hour edge. So pretty interesting story.
Yeah. So SBOM, the software bill of materials, for folks that you and I haven't memorized, SBOMs. Brian Hamrick has written a blog post for CBTS. SBOMs, what are they good for? A nice little play on the song lyric. But so that is a good thing that Checkpoint out of the box had your bill of materials available, and you delivered it to the customers that were requesting it, or you just let everybody know, by the way, we've got it, you can verify this?
We have a very active research group that when there's something serious, our customers get fed information.
Okay.
So they don't have to ask for it. There's resource pages. That same day, we had a resource page. We had the SBOM published. We had, here's the web application firewall. If you're not using our WAF and you're using this other tool, here's the signature.
Whatever,
exactly.
Yeah.
So we had that all done. And that's just a well-known one.
Yeah.
Every day there's 0 days coming out. So we have this constant feed, and that's really one of the main competitive advantages of Checkpoint, is that threat cloud, is our ability to see all these 0 days that are occurring all over the world, using our AI tools, 40 engines out of 70, and finding the countermeasure for it and distributing out to our customers within 3 seconds.
Yeah, that's pretty fast. That's faster than the average bear, you might say.
It's faster than most average hacker. So
yes, that too. What do you see on the horizon for the rest of 2023 as either emerging threats or trends that have started to either gain traction? We've got some standard ones. Ransomware is still out there that hasn't
still
changed.
Increasing.
Yeah, and it's business email compromise doesn't get as much press as ransomware, but it's frequently just as lucrative, if not more. Have you seen other threats out there that you'd want people to be thinking about and be aware of?
Well, back to the ChatGPT. Just last week, Stanford University just released the recipe book to release the genie from the bottle.
Yeah, we were talking about this
during our Skyline Chili delicious lunch.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what really concerns me, because now the guardrails are off. Now there's no guidance. Now there's no adults in the room.
Say a little bit more about what Stanford did, because a lot of people probably don't know.
Stanford got a copy of ChatGPT, and I'd have to remember which version it was, but it's one of the newer versions. I forget if it's 3.5 or 4. And they were able to download it, so it's on a laptop.
Runs all by itself.
Runs by itself. So there's no AI guidance. There's no social rules. There's no guardrails.
So feed it whatever information you want.
Whatever information, and it's not going to talk back to you and say, no, we can't do that. That's against my
programming.
My guidance, yes.
Yeah.
So now you have rogue ChatGPTs, and that's what the hackers are going to leverage.
Okay.
Not only to create code, but also these targeted messages.
Amongst other things.
Yes.
I mean, those are just the easy things to think about. Because I certainly get my fair share of phishing emails and phishing text, the smishing, an SMS text.
Yep.
Those still seem to be pretty poorly worded. And that's where the testing that I've done with ChatGPT, I think it could be a leveling tool for people where English is not their first language. It can take someone whose language skills are not as sophisticated as say, an average American in a sense, it can take their language skills and elevate it so that phishing email looks really good. But in terms of
back when it was Nigerian princes trying to give you money, it was pretty easy to see through
that's
those.
not spelled correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's changed now.
Right. Yeah.
Well, here's one of the reasons it's changed. We've funded their development. We've sent hundreds of millions of dollars to these hackers, and their game is getting better.
Because of ransomware.
Because of ransomware.
Right.
Of course, we're paying them to get better. So they're hiring better people. They have ticketing systems. They share information between each other. And, because they're working in countries that we don't have extradition treaties,
right?
They're working, with
very few risks to their organization. And it has really become a business.
They're encouraged by some of the governments.
Yeah. And
hack United States? Absolutely. We like it when you do that.
Yeah, and it's more than just Russia. I mean, it's definitely Iran has a very active and aggressive hacking organization. North Korea makes a lot of money off of their ransomware attacks, and sometimes they target Southeast Asia, but they also target other countries.
And don't forget China.
Right, and then of course China.
China's been the largest transfer of intellectual property in the history of the human race.
And unfortunately, it was mostly stolen.
Yes.
Or kind of extorted in a sense, because for U.S. companies to work in China, they had to turn over intellectual property. And certainly it's a humongous market. I guess that's a conversation for another day. But when I think about risk, I think about intellectual property risk. Do you have an AI tool that's monitoring outbound communication flows?
So one of the things that we've done a lot of work with is data leakage prevention.
Yep, DLP.
And we have some pretty interesting ideas on it. Of course, you can do it to prevent, certain words. But I like to take
serial number, like social security numbers, credit card numbers,
account numbers, those kind of things. It's going to alert on, and DLP takes a little bit of tuning and a little bit of
that's been
effort.
my experience.
Yeah, there's a little bit of effort, but think about what Elon Musk just did with the letter. He had a letter that went out to every employee. Each letter had different spaces between some of the words. So it was almost serialized by letter. Now, that kind of let the cat out of the bag right there, because I'd been doing things like that, to
detect if data has been...
Right. So in databases, we would always put in a honey token in a database. So a John Q. Public on 123 Oak Street, Anytown. So if that record was queried or moved as part of a bunch of other records, DLP would go nuts and stop the...
Okay.
So all kinds of honey tokens and honey, you can put things within records that shouldn't ever be
moving
accessed.
Outside. Yeah.
But if they are, then track it. So
that makes the rule writing much easier.
It does.
Yeah. Okay. So is that something that's going to be accelerated with a ChatGPT type? Like, are you imagining a future where we take a ChatGPT type tool and say, monitor my network for sensitive or PII type information? Do you think it could be that general, or would we still want to use it?
I think I might submit that and take that idea and use it as my own when I submit it to Checkpoint. But
run with it. Feel free.
Yes. Right now, it's pretty binary. It is what you type it to be. But
yes, that's been my experience.
Yeah. So that's an interesting idea. I like that. I'm going to have to think about that for a bit.
We can message back and forth with Signal or whatever your preferred messaging application. Yes. One of my experiences with ChatGPT as a teacher, I teach as an adjunct at Xavier University, is I wanted to make sure that the tool could not submit exam or really it's essay type questions particularly well, and it didn't because it did a fine job writing an answer, but I had to form the question in such a way that it knew how to write the correct answer.
Right.
So that was my experience with it. I need to do a little bit more playing around with it. I could see if there were no guardrails, you could have it write any number of different things that either would be unsavory or inaccurate completely, but sound really good. So you can take a completely fictitious or inaccurate statement and it sounds very articulate.
Well, that's a challenge in the academic world. These kids are trying to cheat a little bit and leverage it.
God love them. We want them to do well, but they have a lot on their plate, and I just want to make sure that it's their work that they're turning in.
The kids these days think that it's just another tool to be leveraged. And then your challenge is to of course, to try to find that, was it written by ChatGPT or was it original content? And then now there's
ChatGPT 0.
There you go.
Yes.
That's the academic counter tool. So, and then the kids are smart because they're tweaking it a little bit and add a little bit of personality to it as well. So it's happening.
Well, one of the things that people have asked me, like, why did you get into computer security? And I said, well, I get bored a little easy, and I've yet to be bored in the cybersecurity space. It's
the most fastest developing chunk of IT out there. Every day there's something new. There's a new issue, a new challenge, a new breach, a new vulnerability, a new tool. In fact, we track those. There's 0 days every single day, and that's one of the things that Checkpoint's best at, is looking at those 0 days and seeing how to develop the countermeasures very, very quickly and distributing those out to our customers.
That makes sense. And it's interesting, and we'll probably wrap up on this topic, which is the 0 days that are out there. It's difficult to prevent the 0 days. We haven't really talked about user or entity behavior analysis, UEBA, yet another acronym for us in the IT security space. I'm assuming some of the tools that are built into the Checkpoint platform use user and entity-based analysis to determine whether or not it's a malicious threat. I mean, it sounds like you had that in place for the Log4j.
We did, on the web application firewall side of things. Okay. So Checkpoint, of course, sells, Harmony.
You might want to explain what Harmony is.
Harmony is both the endpoint tool and our email tool.
There you go.
So it's, we have brands that span a couple different functions. Then Quantum is our firewalls. And then Infinity is our management package that manages all these. And that's the cool thing about Checkpoint. From one console, you can manage everything, from your firewall to your endpoint tools to your cloud tools, across all your different multiple clouds, your VMware environments, everything. So it's pretty neat. But where we're seeing a lot of artificial intelligence is in the email side of things. And that's one of the reasons that we bought Avanan. But there was a little bit of a bidding war. But Avanan liked our threat cloud and recognized that having that 0 day instant response that Checkpoint has was going to make their product even better. So about a year ago when we bought them, it really is. And it was the fastest growing company in the security space. So,
and that Avanan was a competitor for like a Proofpoint or Mimecast?
Those are the dinosaurs now.
Okay.
What's really amazing is when you put in the Avanan tool behind Microsoft or Proofpoint or whatever, what are all the catches that it's seeing?
So you would have the standard firewall email security gateway they call it, and then you would put in your product Avanan to see what got passed
within the Office 365 environment. It takes about 3 minutes to set it up. It's a quick little API. So
Those
minutes,
are nice. Yeah,
super duper easy, and we can put it in passive mode. So all we're seeing is detection,
right?
Or we can put it in inline, and customers see it. We put it in passive mode for about, depending on how big the customer is. If it's a big customer, usually within the first hour, they're like, okay, that's all we need to see.
Proof of value established.
Yes.
Okay.
And we do call them proof of value rather than proof of concept because it is valuable. And if you look at, how security staffs change when all of a sudden, some of these, we have big, huge telco customers.
Yes.
That used to be investigating, 5,000 events a day, and
to determine if they're incidents. For those of us in the security space, you have an event. It's not all an incident. So then you have to determine if it's an incident.
And it was just painful and cost and time consuming. And, security folks don't like to do that routine work all day. That's why there's a lot of turnover. And that's why the grass is greener, because they say, I'm tired of looking at this job. So what happens is a dramatic change in the quality of life of these employees. Now they can start looking at things that are much more strategic for the company,
Right.
and much more helpful. And we see that transformation is really fun to see real time, and have the staff shrink and have them reassigned to something more important and more strategic and more helpful for the customer.
Yeah, rather than doing incident response 7x24, which can burn you out really, really fast.
It does.
And that was the thing that I definitely stressed when we were putting in tools in my previous career, is like, guys, you're not losing your job. You're going to get to do something much more interesting, because we're going to automate the routine and determine what of the 500 events or 5,000 events have to be investigated as incidents. So I am both a little cautious about, a ChatGPT type of a tool and the negative part, but then the other part of me is thinking, let's turn that tool to our advantage. And like I said, let's have that start to look for not just indicators of compromise, the IOCs of the world, but other things that we're worried about, data exfiltration or misconfigurations. I mean, that's going to be a huge piece of it. So I'm optimistic about the future.
There's some futures coming from Checkpoint. Here's a little bit of a tease now. All right. You're hearing this here first, and not under non-disclosure, but that is one of the biggest challenges is when you're setting up your firewall rules, what's best for you.
Yeah.
And since we have, over 100,000 customers, we know what customers are most effective. So
you can look at that configuration.
In the future, we will be taking the best configurations and instantly leveraging that for customers when they flip things on. Now, right now, it's a little bit of a manual process. We have SEs, we have Diamond support engineers that help you, and they have a lot of documentation and they have a lot of experience. But soon, that's going to change into...
And they'll do something different. They'll be doing something...
Well, they'll validate it. It's one thing to let AI do something and not trust it, but I like to
trust but verify.
Trust but verify.
Yes.
And these are people that have a lot of experience, and they're going to find a mistake. They're going to say, okay, that's not appropriate for this type of customer, and until we tune the AI deployment tools. But we heard some teasing of that from our Chief Technology, CPX.
Well, Pete, this has been great. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your insight, and I'm looking forward to the future, and we'll see what that holds for us.
It's scary.
It's full of opportunity. That's
lots
the way.
Lots
of opportunity. Thanks again,
John. Enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
Lance, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, thanks. And as always, thanks for joining. Till next time, take care.
And we're out.